No one cared about their talent. What people whispered in dressing rooms, limousines, and hotel suites was how many producers they'd seduced, which actor they slept with that week, or who was keeping them on the marquee, despite the fact they couldn't act. Because these women didn't get there through casting calls. They got there through beds, through scandal, through mastering the art of using desire as currency. In classic Hollywood, being promiscuous was an open secret, and many turned it into the role of a lifetime. This video isn't about the divas who pretended to be pure, it's about the ones who broke the rules by sleeping with the men who wrote them. The most provocative, the most censored, the ones producers' wives feared the most, and the ones everyone remembered once the lights went out. They didn't walk into studios hoping for approval. They barged in, draped in confidence, wrapped in mystery, and armed with a smile that could unmake a man. They were the shadow queens of the silver screen, the ones who knew that in Hollywood, secrets whispered in the dark often echoed louder than box office numbers. They weren't just actresses, they were architects of their own myth, engineers of seduction. Every glance was a promise, every laugh a trapdoor. They didn't wait for scripts. They wrote their own with lipstick on mirrors and deals made over champagne. This is their story. Not sanitized, not approved by censors, but exactly as unforgettable as they were. This wasn't just Hollywood, it was a fever dream stitched together with broken promises and studio smoke. Back then, the camera didn't just roll, it hunted. And these women, they became legends, not because they played the game, but because they reprogrammed it using desire as their script. They didn't ask for the spotlight. They took it, flipped it around, and used it as a mirror to blind everyone watching. The industry feared them because it couldn't contain them. Publicists invented lies to downplay them. Studios burned contracts to erase them. But none of it worked. Because what these actresses offered couldn't be replicated, and it certainly couldn't be censored. They knew exactly what they were doing, and how far a well-timed whisper or glance could echo through an entire studio lot. They weren't the victims of their era. They were its unfiltered architects. An angelic blonde, a sweet smile, and Sunday manners. Virginia Mayo looked like she'd stepped out of a pastor's dream and onto a movie set. But beneath the saccharine exterior was one of the most explosive figures in Hollywood's private scene. Virginia quickly understood that the system didn't reward good girls. So, she split herself into two. The charming actress for the cameras and the calculated seductress behind closed doors. Mayo didn't just play roles, she adapted to rooms, men, and power dynamics like a shapeshifter. Her off-screen persona was a masterclass in controlled chaos. At parties, she'd glide in late, drawing every gaze without trying. A lighting technician once said, "Mayo had the power to make you forget you were married in 3 sentences." Her charm wasn't aggressive, it was disarming, sweet, and lethal in equal measure. Behind the scenes, she understood leverage. She didn't beg for roles, she had producers wondering if they'd ever see her again, then showing up at her door with scripts and apologies. She wasn't just another starlet trying to survive the game. She was the game, and she knew how to leave a room with more than just a man's attention. She left with his secrets, his promises, and often a contract. But Virginia was only the first. Because while she may have written the rulebook, the next woman lit it on fire. There was a party once, Beverly Hills, thick with cigar smoke and guilt. Virginia walked in wearing red satin and silence. The room shifted. A producer's wife spilled her drink. An actor forgot his own name mid-conversation. Virginia didn't need to speak. She never did. Her reputation did the talking, an invisible aura that smelled like perfume and danger. And when a columnist once tried to write a hit piece on her, he found a handwritten note at his office door the next morning. No threats, just lipstick and a phone number. He never published the article. Some say she met him privately. Others say she just smiled at him across a bar 3 nights later, and that was enough to end his crusade. That was Mayo's real talent. Not seduction, but domination without effort. She didn't push. She allowed others to trip over themselves trying to catch up. Every man who crossed her path walked away haunted. Every woman who underestimated her ended up learning the hard way that Virginia never played fair because she didn't have to. Tall, a dangerous stare, lips made to say no while doing yes, Beverly Michaels was no one's ingenue. A star of noir and low-budget films, she became something of a legend among the crew, producers, and actors who knew how to read between the lines. On screen, she smoldered. Off screen, she burned. She had this ritual, leaving handwritten pencil notes in male actor scripts. Some were innocently suggestive. Rehearsal in my dressing room, no costume required. Others were bold, cryptic, just a time and an address. Everyone in the studio knew what it meant when Beverly winked at a man before a scene. The rumors outpaced her film credits, which never seemed to match her cult status. One actress once said, "Beverly didn't want the Oscar. She wanted the whole studio overnight. You saw her, and it seemed impossible." But what made Beverly unforgettable wasn't just her appetite, it was her precision. She never wasted a night or a conversation. Even when directors tried to blacklist her for being too bold, she simply slipped into another producer's office and walked out with a new deal. No regrets, no apologies. Hollywood didn't know what to do with her. They couldn't control her, couldn't shame her, and certainly couldn't forget her. And just when they thought they had her figured out, the next woman walked in, speaking softly, but wielding chaos. Beverly didn't just leave lipstick on coffee cups, she left fingerprints on reputations. There was a story, told in hushed tones on the lot, about a leading man who tried to one-up her. He made a crude joke in front of the crew. She didn't flinch. That afternoon, she delivered a scene so electric that the director printed it without a second take. After wrap, she left a note in the man's trailer. "Let the grown-ups act." He never looked her in the eyes again. In a world where actresses were expected to be grateful and quiet, Beverly was neither. She once claimed she auditioned with her smile and negotiated with her silence. No one knew where she learned this control. Maybe she invented it, but everyone felt it. You could feel her power 3 rooms away, like a storm waiting to crack the sky. Beverly wasn't scandalous for attention. She was scandalous by design, and every whisper about her only sharpened her legend. She entered the scene with an accent that could cut glass and eyes that dared directors to look away. Linda Darnell didn't audition. She arrived. Latin soap opera beauty raised with a knife between her teeth. She was the kind of woman who didn't just walk into a room, she claimed it like territory. Her aura was combustible. The cameras didn't just love her, they surrendered. In Hollywood, they called her dangerous, but never to her face. She didn't ask for permission, and when told she needed it, she laughed. A Universal producer once claimed that during 1 week of shooting, Linda dated the leading man by day and the costume chief by night. When someone hinted this might ruin her reputation, she fired back. "Which one? The one you all invented?" She played roles, but she never played along. Her ambition didn't come dressed in polite smiles or coy denials. It came wrapped in satin, soaked in tequila, and delivered with a grin that said, "Try me." Her bed was neutral ground, her body, her own battleground, and her reputation, that was just smoke trailing behind her heels. And as her name echoed through the halls, another woman was making headlines. Not for her acting, but for the trail of broken men she left behind. She came to Hollywood full of promise, a smile built for close-ups, and a heart too wild to cage. But before long, she became more famous for her scandals than her screen time. Her name? Barbara Payton. She didn't just chase chaos, she made it her co-star. She was rumored to have loved actors, stuntmen, directors, even gangsters. And she didn't care? Who knew? Her infamous triangle with Tom Neal and Francho Tone ended with one man in the hospital and the other in jail. But Barbara kept drinking, kept smiling, kept lighting cigarettes during the wreckage of her own life. When people asked her why she spiraled, she just shrugged. "Hollywood loves a tragedy," she once whispered. "I just made mine entertaining." At 39, she was working as a streetwalker on Sunset Boulevard, charging $5 for what once earned her top billing. Her beauty still lingered, but her eyes told another story, of betrayal, of exhaustion, of a system that used her, then spat her out. No studio sent flowers, no magazine wrote tributes. She simply vanished from the industry that once chased her shadow. But her legend never left. Barbara wasn't a cautionary tale. She was the proof that Hollywood devours what it desires most. She was one of the most desired actresses of the 1940s, not because she tried to be, but because she seemed untouchable. Linda Christian had that fallen saint aura that made even the most righteous man stumble. From her teenage years, she was groomed by a powerful producer who later became her lover. Then came the directors, the co-stars, the studio heads. Everyone wanted a piece of Linda, but she always made sure it was on her terms. Her beauty wasn't the loud kind, it was soft, calculated, like a velvet trap. She never shouted to be heard, she whispered, and people leaned in. Some said she was cursed, others said she was chosen. Either way, she moved like she had the script of her life memorized and under control, even as chaos danced at her heels. Her reputation outgrew her filmography. Some thought she didn't have the acting chops. Others knew she didn't care. She wasn't chasing accolades, she was chasing freedom. And when she died in a fire at her ex-husband's house, tongues wagged and conspiracies flew. Some called it an accident. Others said the flames only revealed what she'd been carrying inside all along. But her story wasn't the only one cloaked in ash and allure. Before she was TV's favorite vampire mom, Yvonne DiCarlo was a low-profile, high-voltage bombshell with a passport full of stamps and a diary full of secrets. She arrived in Hollywood from Canada with pin-up curves and a "you don't own me" attitude that made executives sweat through their suits. She filmed westerns by day and partied with gangsters by night. There were whispers she had ties to married actors, musicians, and even a few organized crime figures. She never confirmed, never denied, just raised an eyebrow and let the silence say more than words ever could. "I've been many things," she once told a gossip columnist, "but never boring." Yvonne didn't just seduce men, she disarmed them. She had this way of leaning in during interviews like she was letting you in on a secret the world wasn't ready for. When the monsters made her a family icon, the studios scrubbed her wild years clean. But those who were there knew the truth. She had more lovers than lines of dialogue in her early career, and every one of them remembered her long after the credits rolled. And while Hollywood tried to tame her, another woman from across the ocean was just getting started. She survived a concentration camp, but that was the least scandalous part of her story. Ingrid Pitt, with her Polish roots and British Gothic allure, didn't arrive in Hollywood looking for a break. She came to dominate. Hammer Films in the 60s and 70s gave her a blood-soaked, cleavage-heavy altar, but Ingrid was already a high priestess of seduction. She made demands on set that directors whispered about: precise lighting, specific room temperatures, complete privacy. One contract allegedly had a no underwear clause, which insiders claimed was more about habit than style. She dated actors, producers, and a married diplomat she was caught with on a Berlin balcony, half-dressed, fully unbothered. Her accent melted microphones. Her gaze bent wills. When asked how many lovers she'd had, Ingrid simply said, "Enough not to regret a thing." That was her magic. She didn't apologize. Not for her pleasure, not for her power. One director said, "She didn't seduce you. She made you think it was your idea." The camera adored her, but behind the lens, men unraveled, sometimes literally. Ingrid wasn't alone, because just across the lot, another actress was flipping the script on what it meant to be untouchable and rewriting desire in her own sharp handwriting. Karen Steele arrived in Hollywood not to blend in, but to leave a trail. Her French accent melted microphones, her cheekbones could cut glass, and her stare warned you not to get too close unless you liked scars. Studios pitched her as the next Garbo, but Karen wasn't here to imitate anyone. She had her own rulebook, and she broke every line of it. Her lovers included renowned directors, 2 married heartthrobs, and a European prince who sent her jewelry and unmarked envelopes. A Paramount producer once said, "It was impossible to work with her without falling in love or ruining your marriage." Karen collected hearts the way others collected scripts, briefly, intensely, and without apology. She once showed up to a party wearing only a men's trench coat and heels. At midnight, she was caught kissing a rival actress in the garden. When the photographer arrived, Karen didn't flinch. She lit a cigarette, stared straight into the lens, and said, "I got bored of men. Time for a plot twist." No one could label her. That was the point. She wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing sensation. And when she disappeared from the scene for weeks at a time, the whispers only grew louder. Because Karen knew one truth: mystery sells more tickets than talent ever could. She was Howard Hughes's private fascination long before the tabloids knew her face. Faith Domergue was a young Hollywood hopeful when the mogul discovered her, polished her image, and tried to keep her sequestered in his mansion like a priceless secret. But Faith didn't wilt, she observed. She mastered the playbook from the inside, then flipped the script the moment she stepped back into daylight. She became known for whirlwind connections with screenwriters, rising actors, and aging executives who assumed they were insulated from gossip. They weren't. One studio chief swore she once vanished from a major shoot because a Spanish bullfighter whisked her off to Madrid. She returned 2 weeks later without so much as a reprimand. "She knows more industry secrets than our publicists," one producer grumbled, and he wasn't exaggerating. Her filmography was patchy. Her legacy? Undeniable. If your phone rang after midnight and it was Faith, you weren't running lines. She didn't audition, she summoned. She didn't network. She negotiated with perfume, wit, and the kind of smile that made men forget their own names. She was proof that power in Hollywood didn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wore red lipstick and knew when to vanish. She was never quite a household name, but everyone in the industry knew her. Leela Anders, a contract player at RKO, never broke into A-list fame, but she broke enough rules to leave dents in the studio walls. She had a husky voice, a laugh like broken glass, and eyes that said yes, even when her words didn't. Studio bosses tried to mold her. Press agents begged her to behave. But Lila had her own game. She once disappeared for 3 days during a publicity tour in New York. When asked where she went, she simply said, "I had dinner plans." Rumors say she spent the weekend with a married senator, a French art dealer, and a rival starlet, all in the same hotel. She never got her name in lights. But if you whispered Lila at a rap party, every veteran in the room would go silent. She didn't chase immortality, she forced you to remember her. Some ended up burned, others forgotten, a few quietly worshipped. But all of them, every single one, knew how to use their presence, their pleasure, and their secrets as currency in a world that wanted them silent. These women weren't just scandals, they were strategy in heels. They didn't climb the ladder, they flipped it over and built their own throne. And that's what unsettled people the most. They never begged, never explained, never said sorry. In an era where women were expected to be seen but not heard, they made sure to be remembered, and not for their lines of dialogue, but for the chaos they left behind. Today, you might call them pioneers of sexual power, or maybe just dangerous women. But in their time, there was only one word that followed them down studio hallways, through gossip columns, and across whispered dinners in Beverly Hills: promiscuous. But maybe, just maybe, they were the ones directing the real show all along. And you? Did you know these names hiding behind the spotlight? Or did you think Hollywood's dangerous women only arrived in the age of the internet?